When I first inherited my family's ranch, I thought the biggest challenge would be keeping up the land and honoring the history behind it. What I didn't expect was a letter from the local HOA demanding over $250,000. At first, I laughed, thinking it was some kind of mistake. After all, my ranch had been in my family for generations, and we never agreed to be part of any HOA. But as I read through their notice, it became clear this wasn't a joke. They claimed my property was under their control and that I owed them for community fees and improvements. I decided to dig deeper, and what I uncovered shocked me. Without my knowledge, the HOA had built a series of luxury amenities right on land that legally belonged to my ranch. Pools, tennis courts, even part of their so-called clubhouse, all standing on ground they didn't own. And now they wanted me to pay them $250,000 for the privilege of keeping what was already mine. Neighbors started whispering, some warning me not to stir up trouble. But I couldn't just let it slide. This wasn't only about money. It was about standing up for my family's legacy and the land they left behind. I reached out to a lawyer, pulled the property maps, and prepared myself for a battle I didn't see coming. The more I looked into it, the more tangled it became. Every answer led to more questions. Who authorized these builds, and how long had this been going on? With so much at stake, I knew one wrong move could change everything. And just when I thought I was getting closer to the truth, something happened that flipped the entire fight upside down. I couldn't get the image out of my head. The HOA clubhouse, buzzing with people, sitting right on land that belonged to me. The more I thought about it, the more it didn't add up. My grandfather kept meticulous records of the ranch boundaries, and I still had the old deeds and surveys tucked away in boxes. Late one night, I spread everything out on the kitchen table, comparing the faded maps to the glossy HOA development plans I had pulled from the county office. The lines didn't lie. They had crossed over, and not just by a few feet. Entire sections of their property were sitting inside my boundary lines. The strangest part was how confident they seemed. Instead of backing down, they doubled down, sending me letters filled with legal jargon, claiming I had benefited from their improvements. But I hadn't used a single thing they built. I lived on my ranch, worked the land, and kept to myself. So, why were they so desperate to tie me into their community? I started talking to neighbors who'd lived here longer than I had. Some told me the HOA had been expanding for years, slowly pushing fences farther out, buying small plots, and intimidating anyone who questioned them. One older neighbor warned me that once they set their sights on land, they rarely let go. It wasn't just about the money, it was about control. Still, something about their confidence bothered me. It felt like they knew something I didn't. Every time I looked at the clubhouse or the tennis courts on my land, I wondered, was this a mistake, or had someone in power helped them slip this through? And if so, how far were they willing to go to keep me quiet? The pressure kept building, and soon it wasn't just letters in the mail. HOA representatives started showing up at my gate, dressed in suits, carrying clipboards, and speaking like they already owned the place. They'd point at the land markers and claim I was confused about where my property ended. One even hinted that fighting back would cost me more in legal fees than the land itself was worth. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a mix-up, it was a strategy. Behind the scenes, I started piecing together how deep their influence went. At the county office, I found records that looked altered, almost as if someone had shifted the lines just enough to blur the boundaries. When I asked questions, clerks gave me vague answers, almost nervous to say too much. It was clear the HOA had more friends in official places than I first imagined. Meanwhile, whispers spread in the neighborhood. Some folks quietly supported me, admitting they had been pressured into giving up small strips of land over the years. Others avoided me altogether, afraid of being associated with anyone challenging the HOA. Even a local contractor confided that he was told to keep quiet about where the clubhouse was built, or risk losing business in the area. The ranch itself became a reminder of the fight. Every time I rode the fence line, I could see where the HOA's manicured grounds pushed against the rugged, natural edges of my family's property. It was like two worlds colliding, one built on legacy and hard work, the other on control and appearances. The more I dug, the more it felt like this battle was about more than money. And the deeper I got, the clearer it became that someone, somewhere, was determined to keep the truth buried. It all came to a breaking point when I received a formal notice taped to my front gate. This time, the HOA wasn't just demanding money. They claimed they were preparing to take legal action to seize part of my ranch. The words jumped off the page like a threat. I could almost hear the arrogance behind them, as if they believed I would finally give in. But instead of fear, it only fueled my determination. I knew I needed undeniable proof, something that couldn't be brushed aside with paperwork or empty threats. I spent days combing through county records, old maps, and surveyor notes. Each piece confirmed the same thing: my family's land had been stolen in plain sight. The deeper I went, the more I uncovered: board members with ties to local officials, suspicious donations funneled into zoning committees, and years of carefully worded documents designed to confuse landowners like me. Then came the night I decided to walk the property line under the stars, flashlight in hand, tracing the markers my grandfather had set decades ago. My boots crunched against the dry soil as I crossed into the edge of the HOA's pristine tennis courts. Right there, buried under fresh gravel, I found one of the original survey stakes, solid proof that their construction had crossed onto my side. My heart raced, knowing this was the evidence I had been searching for. But as I stood there, I realized I wasn't alone. A pair of headlights flicked on from the clubhouse parking lot, shining straight toward me. The engine revved, and the sound cut through the silence of the night. My grip tightened on the flashlight, the weight of the fight pressing down harder than ever. Whatever was coming next, it was clear the real battle was just about to begin. The headlights grew brighter, locking on me like a spotlight. For a moment, I froze, convinced the HOA had caught me gathering evidence. But instead of pulling away, the vehicle slowly rolled closer, tires crunching against the gravel. My heart pounded as I stepped back toward the fence line, gripping the survey stake I'd uncovered like it was both proof and protection. When the car finally stopped, a figure stepped out, not an HOA board member, but someone I hadn't seen in years. It was a former employee of the ranch, a man who used to help my grandfather with cattle before the HOA pushed him out. He told me something I wasn't prepared to hear. The land dispute wasn't just about property lines. It went deeper. Years ago, when the HOA began their expansion, they secretly acquired falsified surveys from a private company, the same company that had worked with developers across the county. According to him, my family's ranch wasn't the only property targeted. Several neighbors had already lost pieces of their land without even realizing it. My case was just the biggest because the clubhouse and courts were sitting right in the middle of it. The revelation sent a chill through me. If what he said was true, then this wasn't just a greedy HOA trying to grab land. It was part of a much larger scheme. That explained their confidence, their connections, and why so many records felt tampered with. They weren't afraid of me because they'd been getting away with this for years. Before I could ask more, he warned me to be careful. He said people who dug too deep into these dealings often found themselves backed into corners they couldn't escape. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he drove off, leaving me standing alone under the headlights, holding proof in one hand and a new, dangerous secret in the other. The next morning, I knew it was time to stop being on the defensive. With the survey stake in hand, copies of the original deeds, and the information the former ranch hand had shared, I set up a meeting with my attorney. We walked straight into the county office, and for the first time, the weight of evidence was on my side. When the maps were laid out, the truth was undeniable. The HOA had built major parts of their development directly on land that belonged to my family. What's more, the forged surveys and altered records were exposed in front of county officials who had no choice but to take notice. The HOA board was furious. They tried to intimidate, they tried to argue, but the proof spoke louder than their polished words. By the end of the session, their legal threats crumbled. Instead of me owing them $250,000, they were suddenly staring down lawsuits of their own, with fines and possible criminal charges for fraud and land theft. For the first time since this battle began, the tide had turned, and I could finally breathe. But just as I thought the fight was over, the unexpected twist came. One of the county clerks quietly slipped me a note as we left. It said, "This doesn't end here. Check the eastern boundary." Confused, I drove out to the far side of the ranch that same evening. And sure enough, what I found made my stomach drop. Hidden behind rows of fresh fencing and new landscaping, the HOA had already started pushing farther. Another expansion project creeping over onto my land, completely unannounced. I had won one battle, but standing there on that boundary line, I realized the war for my ranch was only just beginning. Standing at that eastern boundary, I realized the fight with the HOA wasn't about a single survey line, it was about a mindset. They believed power and money could rewrite history, erase boundaries, and swallow up family legacies like mine. But what they didn't count on was persistence. Instead of feeling defeated by the discovery, I doubled down. With the county already investigating their fraudulent records, I filed additional claims and made sure the media knew the story. Once the spotlight turned on them, the HOA board had nowhere to hide. Their image of authority and control quickly began to crack. Neighbors who had once stayed quiet started coming forward, sharing their own experiences of losing land or being pressured into silence. What began as a lonely fight for my ranch turned into something bigger, a collective pushback against years of intimidation. Slowly, people realized they weren't powerless, and together, we started holding the HOA accountable. In the end, I was able to secure my ranch, protect my family's legacy, and expose a scheme that might have cost many others their homes. The clubhouse and courts built on my land became symbols of their greed, and eventually, they were forced to negotiate restitution instead of demanding it. It wasn't an easy road, but every long night of research and every tense confrontation was worth it. Looking back, the lesson was clear. Never underestimate the value of standing your ground, literally and figuratively. Land isn't just dirt and fences. It's history, its family, and its identity. The HOA thought they could bury the truth under paperwork and intimidation, but in the end, it was the truth that buried them. And as I walked the ranch one last time with the sun setting, I finally felt the peace my grandfather must have felt, knowing the land was safe where it belonged.